Hi, welcome back to the Wealth and Women podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the challenges that we have all faced in our careers and how we've overcome those challenges. Welcome back to the Wealth and Women podcast. We have previously talked a lot about all the good things about being a financial planner and a financial coach. So today we're going to focus on what the tough stuff is in terms of our jobs, what we find difficult, and how we've overcome that over the years. So ladies, who should we start with? Tracy, do you want to talk about what you find difficult in the job?
Yeah, so I think that the most difficult thing with a job is that, we are very regulated and it's keeping up to date with all the changes that are happening. And as a result of all that regulation, paperwork, there's so much paperwork that we need to make sure that we're covering off. But then I think what can be difficult with a job is that we're meeting all sorts of people. And, I mentioned before that sometimes you feel like a counsellor to these people, and they're exposing their biggest deep secrets to us. And I've come across situations whereby a client has told me that they're terminally ill, and they're breaking the heart and they're worried about the financial impact that that's going to have on their family. So when you leave those meetings, you're thinking about them for days and days and days, those situations. There's not many tough things about the job, but the ones that are tough, they can be very tough, emotionally draining on you. So yeah.
It did make me chuckle just a tiny bit when you said paperwork, because if you ever go into the office where Tracy works, you wouldn't think anybody worked at her desk because there's never any paperwork on it. She's so efficient. It's unbelievable.
I'm one of the most efficient people going because I'm very good at delegating. Delegating is my key.
Yeah.
But that's how I work as an efficient advisor. I like to delegate.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think paperwork in this job is right. It's needed. I think there's probably more paperwork. There should be more of it online these days, probably a little bit more electronic in the world that we're in. But I understand why we need the paperwork. It is very highly regulated, rightly so, and there has to be some sort of record in what we're doing. But that, I think the reason I got into the job initially was because I'm good with people. I like to go out and meet people and chat and really learn about people's lives. So to come back to the office, and there are days where I'll sit in my office at home and I'm on my own all day doing paperwork, getting it done, the reports, and you need actually quite a lot of concentration to be doing some of the complex reports that we do, don't you? So sitting there, hour in, hour out, doing these reports and making sure that they're correct, because I'm sure with all you, we're probably a little bit of perfectionists in us. We like to make sure that we're doing the job right. That's the bit I find the most difficult personally. And I do find, when my other half comes home at the end of the day, I'll probably chat his head off for a good half an hour afterwards because I've been in the office all on my own, and he's been in this massive open plan office with lots and lots of people asking him for this, that and the other. And the first thing I do when he walks through the door is, because I haven't spoken to many people. So I think that's definitely one of the difficulties for me.
Yeah, and I think like another challenge that we have is, still on the paperwork topic, is sometimes we want to do things in an efficient time, but then there's third parties are stopping us from doing things in a productive manner. You're waiting for information from providers, and the information that they're given isn't necessarily correct. Each insurance company or whatever, their format of how they give us that information is different. It's different. It'd be so much easier if there was a standard format for insurance companies, whatever, to give us this information. At the moment, it isn't there, and as advisors, we have to decipher it, and it makes the process a bit clunky at times. So I just feel like things like that can be quite frustrating, and it's completely out of your control.
Yeah,
it's completely out of our control. But we just, at the moment, we just have to work with it.
I think adding to that as well, I think we do have a responsibility, obviously, to train newbies in the company and make sure that people that are not aware of how the processes work, putting the time in to make sure that they're learning. And actually, when you have got deadlines to meet and you're trying to balance that of giving people patience to make sure that they're learning and knowing what to do, but also making sure, like you say, that the information's correct and that you've got everything you need. I think that's a bit of a skill, is actually just taking a step back and thinking, just just remember when it was you back then learning and not knowing about finance or anything like that. I think that's quite a fine balance.
Yeah, please. So I would say time, which you've both just said, but it's just, I think, one of the biggest challenges, because there's so much we can do, and you meet a new client, you want to get their work done, you want to help your colleagues, so managing time is a challenge and something you have to be quite disciplined with, which sometimes I am and sometimes I'm not, because we're not perfect. Also, I think when you're not having a great day, still putting your best foot forward, because just because you're having a bad day for whatever reason, when you go into a client meeting, you can't carry that with you. And that can in itself be quite a performance. And so, it's wonderful having your client interactions when you're feeling on top of the world. But when you're having a hard time, actually doing that is significantly more work than it would otherwise be. The other thing I would say from my personal experiences is working with colleagues can sometimes be challenging. If I'm honest, I don't want to put anyone off from becoming a planner, but I've always worked in firms where there's an individual target, but I have a firm belief that you get better outcomes for the firm if you work collaboratively. And that's always a conflict that's quite difficult to manage. And sometimes putting yourself out there to work with people who then might, because you don't know your colleagues that well necessarily, they might end up acting in a way that you wouldn't, and it doesn't work out for you. Actually, having the determination to behave the way you want to behave and hope that it's going to work out, and work on the basis that karma, what goes around comes around. I think that's quite a challenge to do for me personally, based on previous experiences, but something I continue to do because, it's my values. So that would be my day-to-day struggles.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think, yes, when you are in a position where you partner with various, providers and all sorts, and you outsource loads for legal, compliance, IT, whatever, and everyone works according to the timeline, it's really hard to sync and then provide, making sure that you cut down on the waste of time and energy and money and so on. And I feel like from a point of view of as a financial coach with my own business, I find that often when you put a proposition together and you try to initiate collaborations and so on, there's such a lag that by the time, again, one of the reasons why I do this is because I try to provide financial guidance and education at affordable prices for employees or financial advisors and so on. And so for every single time when you might experience this when you have the initial meetings with the client, and by the time you actually initiate that relationship and you start getting paid, until that point in the relationship where you start getting paid, all of the time that you put in is an investment that sometimes doesn't pay off. And just understanding, that actually when you initiate a conversation, I wish people were mindful of each other's time and energy and so on, so that everyone feels rewarded in that process. Not to mention the amount of times, just because I live in the unregulated work and world, and I provide a lot of education and financial well-being workshops and things. People associate that just because I talk about financial well-being and not financial advice, it almost see the service as a bit of a charity. It's like, okay, can you come in and talk for free for like 2 hours? Oh, by the way, can you prep this? Can you put some slides together? And that, I think that's where the hard bit is, because I would do this work for free because I'm so passionate about it. But understanding that, for me to be able to sustain this, I need to get paid too. So I think one of the most challenges things in my work would be to do with the continuity or the continuum of my business, to run it as a business, not with my heart, because obviously I would give all of my time. And yes, sometimes I choose to volunteer. Like I do a lot of work with PFS and others to go in schools and workplaces to provide, financial education for free, to create awareness. But there is a time when you feel like, okay, well, but this is a business, it's not a charity. And but again, you work with people, and actually that leads me to the next most challenging thing, which is actually be able to keep a cool head when the client just pours everything onto you. And I think you touched upon that, Tracy. As human beings, we get triggered too. We get triggered by personal stories, and when they talk about upbringing and like key moments in their lives and the struggles. And sometimes I come across women who go through financial abuse, and it's so heartbreaking, and it's really, really my role there is to give them a lifeline, throw the odd buoyancy mechanism for them. So as a human being, my heart really feels for them, but I need to find that strength in myself, and to keep, to help them cope, and help them build that resilience toolbox for themselves to then not need me as much, because my success as a coach is their independence, their ability to navigate changes and challenges on their own. So I think that's the hardest bit for me to, at the end of the day, you were talking about, going full on chatting to your husband. I just want to hide in a dark room and breathe heavily for a while, or deep breathing for a while, just to process and kind of get myself back so I can show up the next day with a smile on my face and all the energy in the world. It's hard sometimes, but
I must admit, actually, if I've had a day full of meetings, I'm the complete opposite. Then I do want to just sit and be quiet. And I sometimes I find it difficult if you've got a lot of engagements on over the weekend, and you've had a really full-on week, and then you've got to go maybe to a wedding or somewhere where you don't know everyone, or a party, and actually put the face on and be excited. And that can be, I think, quite draining sometimes. The travel sometimes with this job as well, I think that I've certainly noticed as I'm getting older, it's more difficult being in the car for a good few hours each way. But on the plus side, get to listen to lots of podcasts and actually try and sort of build knowledge and things. So I think that's a positive. I definitely think the emotional side is a big one, isn't it? When you have clients who are emotionally unloading on you, and like you say, they can be quite personal stories that maybe would trigger something that you've experienced, to try and keep a professional appearance, but actually still actively listening to it and really being engaged in that conversation when it's happening. It's quite a skill. I think it is quite a skill.
And I think market events as well, that can make this job difficult. It's completely out of our control. For example, when COVID struck, the market collapsed, and it fell 35% overnight. The phone calls, the worrying clients, and it's kind of bringing in that reassurance. We didn't know what COVID was. We didn't know how long the market was going to fall for, continue falling for. But we had uncertainty as well. But we knew just as much as they did. But it was bringing that reassurance to the clients to kind of go, it'll be okay. It's only short term. It will, and it's been strong. And it's just like what we're going through. We've had this high inflation. Interest rates have increased, and people are like, well, I might as well put the money in the bank. That used to grain on me. This performed poorly. I could have done better in the bank. Why should I stick with you? And it's things like that can be challenging when you're kind of still selling yourself, so to speak, aren't you? And
Did you find with COVID that clients didn't just expect you to understand what was going to happen in the markets, but they also expected you to understand what was going to happen with COVID? Because I definitely, I had so many conversations where they're asking you, what's going to happen with COVID? What's just because that's what's in their head, and you're their trusted advisor. So I don't think they ever expect you to know the answer, but they just want to have those conversations.
Definitely.
Those being asked questions you can't answer, but just being someone who can listen. I think is important, but exhausting sometimes.
Absolutely.
I mean, you do find that a lot of financial advisors that I've come across, certainly, because these are the longest, again, it's longer term relationships, whereas coaches, you can work with someone for a while and then off they go, they grow up, we say goodbye, and you pass, they go off and work maybe with a financial advisor. But we find that it can come as a surprise for a lot of financial advisors, and they can perceive it as a bit of a personal failure. When clients shift from a place of certainty and collaboration and true partnership and we trust each other to moments like this, when they go through significant change and they shift from like a thriving mode to a survival mode, and they start behaving really erratically, and they cling on to certainty, and they start, testing the trust, and they start probing things, and so those are the points, the points where you need to understand how someone can shift from a place of abundance and growth and well-being to a place of survival, where all they see is risk, all they see is uncertainty, all they want is to consolidate, simplify, and take everything to a point where it feels under control, however good or bad it may be for the well-being of that client financially, personally, but they need that sense of certainty. So I think that's when it really is hard, but it is testing your skills as a financial professional to work with them to get them out of the woods into a place of possibility. But it's hard. It really is hard. Those moments can be really, really draining and testing.
Yeah. What else that sort of triggered for me is when you have clients who you really invest in and you do the work and the plan's right, and they just I've had clients before where they'll come back and say, oh, so-and-so in the pub though has told me this, and I've been asking so-and-so at work about this and they're telling me this, and it can get quite frustrating where you think, well, you've come to me for advice, I've really put my time and effort into this, and I genuinely think this is the right thing to do, but you're just not listening, you don't want to take it on, and you feel a little bit sort of catch-22.
They're kind of devaluing your worth.
You sort of feel like, what am I missing here? Why are they not seeing the value in it? I think that can be quite frustrating. Like, say, when you put your heart and soul into it and you're pleased with the outcome and you think, yes, I think I've got this one right, this is good. And then they just won't take it on board.
I remember a client came as a recommendation from their financial advisor, and I soon understood why, because the person, he's not, I think he's in his prime. He earns quite good money. And then one day he decided to opt out of his pension and put that money into cryptocurrency. And I think as a financial planner, they felt like we've just messed it up. Basically, he's acting against everything we said to him not to do, and so on. So he walked through my virtual door as a like a rescue. Can you deal with that, please? Because this is ridiculous. We can't say no. You need to go back, and then gradually it's really rebuilding their trust in the systems around them, and the trust in themselves, and kind of move away from the noise and the shinier toy, and understand, okay, you can still have that whilst you're building the rest. It's not that or that. I think that those are moments when you feel like, oh my goodness, as a professional, I failed this person, because clearly they act against my best advice.
I also think that just generally we hold ourselves to such high standards. One of the hardest things probably for myself, and I imagine it's not going to be different for you, is dealing with it when we think we've not met our ridiculously impossible standards, and just thinking about the way we talk to ourselves sometimes when we don't think we've achieved perfection, which obviously no one can, and how hard it is because the way we talk to ourselves is so much different to the way we would talk to each other.
Yes.
And it's so important for us to take a step back when we're beating ourselves up internally. Would I be saying this to my friend right now if she was telling me that this has happened? And just sort of reframing, but that's definitely one of the biggest challenges I find. Ridiculous standards for myself.
That is so true. My other half, Ben, I don't know how many times he said it to me. He's like, Emma, this is not that bad. Why are you being so hard on yourself? You are good at your job. Getting that imposter syndrome going on again. Because I think that's what it is. We expect such high standards for our clients. If we feel we're not getting it right, we really beat ourselves up about it. And I really do genuinely feel quite sad. I'm like, I just want the best for them, and I personally feel so responsible if I feel I'm not getting it right. I think we're terrible for that. I think we are.
Have you been through, because I know you've been presenting in one capacity or another, but when you go through presentations and you have that sinking feeling that I haven't said that, I haven't said that, I haven't said that, and you feel like I often just for the rest of the day, it's such a
bits.
Honestly, I feel like I failed them.
Yeah.
I should have said all those things, and I can't, I seem to just not focus on what I said right, but or on everything that I haven't said or might have said better, and is that beating yourself up to the point, and I need to remind myself to grab a pen and kind of go, okay, now you write it down. Now you take it out of your system, because you haven't done it because you meant bad. You didn't mean to not say those things. It's because it just happened. But it happens every single time. I don't know if it's just the growth or.
But I think that's why we're good in our job.
Yeah,
we're critical of ourselves. We're not complacent when, that was good. We're
good
learning
enough.
from things that didn't go so well. I was constantly, especially in the early years of being a financial advisor, meetings were tough. Like, didn't ask the questions in the right way. The clients were shutting down. It was things like that. And I was like, how could I have done that better? And, accepting I wasn't good enough at that point in time. And you can either go, all right, okay, fine, or you can do something about it and grow from it. And
we do, don't we? I think we self-measure. I very regularly after a meeting will sit maybe in the car and think, right, what did I do well there? What did I not do so well? Maybe I could have phrased that a better way. Did I have a true connection with the client? Were they really engaged, or were they just sort of humouring me because I was there? I think that's a big thing, especially if you want to progress and get better at something. Maybe you're not.
And what can be tough sometimes. A client can say something quite negative towards you. They can't, that can happen. You can't control the people you're meeting, and it's dealing with that. Dealing with that comment. And maybe try not to take it too personally. I think this industry, you grow a thick skin. You truly do. You learn to grow a thick skin. That can put people off in entering the industry, but it shouldn't.
No.
It truly shouldn't.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I think all the changes too in regulations, I think we mentioned in our previous discussions, but I think you can easily feel like you're on the wrong foot, especially when the financial year changes and you're kind of, okay, well, I need to bring myself up to speed with the new allowances, and sometimes clients get hold of this information because it's in the press, and they laser focus because it's usually attached to a crisis, a pain point, and you feel like, okay, well, am I letting you down? You forget that you're the human who needs to read all those things. And especially when you work in a silo, I find that because I don't have a team to lean into, it's like, Tracy, Emma, Hazel, can you do this? Can you, you have the conversation, or have you been reading this and can you summarize that for me? You don't have all this. So I think in a sole entrepreneur business, for example, it's me, myself, and I, and that's the hardest thing, not to have that sanity check. Have I said it right? What would you have done? When you don't have the next the team next to you, kind of in your corner, and kind of going, no, you did well, or maybe you could have said that, or maybe here's another thing that you may want to think about. All these things do play in the back of your mind, and I think that puts a lot of weight at the end of the day, thinking, have I done the best I could have done for my client?
That's what it always boils down to, doesn't it? Have you done the best job that you could do?
But obviously in that moment we all have done the best job we could do, because none of us are going in there to do a bad job.
No, that's the thing.
That's what we all need to remember.
That is the thing, isn't it? Yeah. I think, when you do make the occasional mistake, which is bound to happen, we're all human, that's something that I've learned to get over a bit quicker these days. I think back when I first started, I would really, really feel awful about that. And I still do if I make a mistake, but you learn to put it right and move on.
Yeah, it's how you deal with the mistake that makes or breaks your relationships.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've always found that as long as you're very honest, you've got a solution and you put them right, then 9 times out of 10 people don't have an issue.
Yeah.
And
I
sometimes
remember
like you more because they respect the honesty.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it shows your true colours, really, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember I was working with this school, and they brought me in a part of it. They were transitioning from one type of pension to the next best thing, and it was like a consultancy thing. So I've done some work with both teachers and I was supposed to do a follow-up and create a report. It was like a calculator thing.
Yeah.
And because the name was the same, I forgot that I'm getting old and I need glasses. So I started typing, and the next, the name pops up. And obviously I thought that was it. And then I sent the report to them. And he did come back and said, I'm really sorry, I'm not that person. I'm this other John person.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
And I felt like the floor, it wasn't, I just
Swallow me.
want, yeah, exactly. And then I had to own it and have a conversation with both of them. And luckily it wasn't like hugely confidential. I mean, there were things that, circumstances being mitigated, but I felt like such a failure.
Yeah.
To me, it was not it wasn't
Not acceptable.
acceptable to do this, but it did help that we had that conversation and they said it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I also remember a presentation I did to a huge global company, and it was to do with retirement planning, and that morning I heard that an aunt of mine died, but in horrendous circumstances. And when you get triggered and you feel like, usually it happens around Christmas when you draw a line in the sand and go, whoa, what have I achieved this year? Well, there was a moment for me when I thought I kind of drew a bit of a line in the sand and go, if I die today, would I be proud? What would they say about me? That thing. So with that mindset, I walked into this presentation, and where the presentation was about balancing mindset and practical, it just went like my mind took over.
Yeah.
And I was like into that zone where I think I blurred, and then I almost like became conscious again, like 45 minutes into the presentation, going, oh my goodness, I have about 40 slides to cover from now onwards to talk about because it was to do with the meaning of life and the purpose, and but that at that point, the little person in me who like had a bit of a crisis, like a life crisis, thinking, what is this for? And let's share with these people right here, right now. Let's use this platform to let it all out. And I was thinking, and I beat myself up so much because I wasn't upfront. I wasn't honest with them to say, this morning I had some news, and it may not be the best I can be, but and kind of stick to. Instead of saying it up front and being honest about my vulnerability, I tried to hide it. But the more I tried to hide it, the harder it
came out even more. That's the thing, isn't it?
It's probably one of the worst presentations I've ever delivered.
But thanks for sharing that, because actually it's so important to share things where we're vulnerable. I think it's one of the most important things we can do with other people. And it also, like, you didn't share it up front, and now you've had that experience, and you probably would have shared it up front next time. And I find there are certain situations I find myself in where past experiences make those situations disproportionately stressful for me. And I just make sure I say so beforehand. So generally not with clients, but I find team meetings really difficult, even though I have an amazing team around me. And so before my first team meeting that I went into at the firm I'm working in now, I took my boss aside and said, I just need you to know that I find team meetings really difficult because they feel like a hostile environment to me. I appreciate that's not the case, but you just need to know that in case I'm a bit weird. And the fact that I said it out loud meant that huge elephant in the room shrunk down to this tiny, tiny weeny baby elephant, and I felt okay. So I think it's important to recognise that we all have these things happen. And the more we share, the more we we all think we're a bit mad, I think, when we don't share these things. And then we all speak to each other and it's like, no, actually, we all have these concerns. It makes things easier.
Yeah, I think it's hard when people look at you and turn to you as the expert, and that's usually clients or, you know, like more sort of people from within the business that maybe don't have the same expertise as you do, and they come to you. You feel like you have that duty of being the perfect product, the perfect proposition, and that, you know, that it doesn't really sync with you being the best you can be professionally, but also being the human that you are, with all the challenges that come with being a human, basically.
Yeah, I think you're right. Have there been any sort of failures or disappointments in your careers that you have overcome? Anything in particular?
So I like to think of nothing as a failure because I'm still here.
Yeah, like that.
But I have definitely in my career made decisions so I made decisions to move firms from somewhere I was happy for good reasons. And when I got to the new firm, it wasn't what I expected. And that was really hard for me. I feel like I almost went through a grief of having lost something that I was happy in, being somewhere where I was really unhappy. It wasn't because it was a bad firm. It was just culturally not the right fit, and the job was not what I expected. So that was a real challenge. And I did what I could to, well, one, looking back on it, I know that I had a kind of feeling before I moved that it might not be right, but I put that down to nerves. So one thing I have learned is that if my gut's telling me something doesn't feel right, that I should listen to my gut. And that's something that I will take with me forever in the future, because, you know, it's instinct for a reason. But also I learned a lot while I was at that firm, left on good terms because we both realised that actually it just wasn't a good fit. I added value to them while I was there. They added value to me, and so on. But it got me to where I am now. So it was a tough time, but you take out the good things. You try and leave a positive mark wherever you go. And then, you know, the journey takes you to where you're meant to be eventually.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I remember having a role at that time. They were thinking, oh, you know, we're going to bring more of they were trying to create a proposition for a set of their clients, and they said, oh, we really want to develop the coaching part of what we do. And the recruitment was done by one of the partners, and I think his vision was not in sync with other people's vision. And also, I mean, businesses do change their vision as they grow, and what's a priority one year, it changes the next year. So I think I got caught in that disconnect between them, and I thought I was coming on board to do something, and 1 year down the line I was still not delivering what I was supposed to do. There was a increasing feeling of just, you know, just inadequacy, you know, when it came to, and to your point, Hazel, I had an increasing feeling that I was wasting my time and everyone's time. And in the end I left, but I think my learning there was maybe a year too late. Maybe, you know, my desire to go into a job and be employed and having that job certainty, you know, delivering something without having 100% reassurance or collaboration, you know, kind of testing my stakeholders from the get-go, that almost cost me a year. I mean, luckily, I'm on the same wavelength as you are, because I take any setback with a set of opportunity. What is the learning opportunity? And kind of look at, actually, what have I gained this year? Even if I failed, what is it that I've actually succeeded? You know, what is the progress that I made? And it was that contract with myself that next time round, don't jump on the opportunity so quickly. Just test the waters, speak with more people, understand that you know, it's a huge commitment. Might as well make it in a way that suits you long term, and just don't hope. See where you can influence and control, because I think that's where the most risk of, you know, creating a gap between your reality and your expectations is. And I think in that gap, we find a lot of unhappiness lots of the time.
Yeah, I think back to, when if I had to think about when I felt I failed, I think the earliest memory I've got from this job is when I was only it must have been 2007 and 8, so I was really new into it. And I'd been to see a client and she had quite a high risk portfolio in her pension. And I remember thinking, we talked about her retirement plans and this, that and the other. So I'd written to her to say, you need to down risk now if you're going to take money out of the pension in case the markets change. And obviously 2007 and 8 was quite a big change in the market. And I remember the markets fell, and all of a sudden she phoned and said, I've just had a statement through my pension and it's gone down by 1/3. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I wrote you a letter. I told you to do this. I'd said it in the meeting and I'd written a letter. And I remember it was Christmas Eve and this complaint letter came in on the last day, just as I was walking out the office. And what would I have been then? 23? Probably, yeah. About 23.
Yeah. That sounds brutal.
And I got home and I bawled my eyes out to my mum because I felt like, oh my God, I've a complaint and I've done the wrong thing and I don't know what to do. And I thought, so getting over my mum's brilliant. She was like, Emma, you did what you could. But I just genuinely felt like I'd let this lady down, and it wasn't a big pension. And I thought, oh my gosh, how's she going to cope? So I remember that as my first ever real feeling of failure. I think the other time really has been with exams. Tracy will know this because I'm not the best at passing exams first time. And recently I've been doing the STEP exams and the accounting one. I'm not great, as Tracy knows. Spreadsheets isn't my thing, and that's one of the big elements of that exam. Hazel, you'll know, I think you've taken it, have you?
I'm not doing that one now.
Right, so you'll definitely know. And it's taken me 3 times to pass it. But, I think the feeling you get afterwards when you finally get there is brilliant. But especially working with someone like Tracy, you're very good at that sort of side of thing, and you've nailed it first time. You just start to question yourself a little bit, I think, about, oh God, am I good enough to be doing this? And can I get it done? And, Tracy's always been very encouraging, as everyone else in the company, and the grit obviously came through and I did it. But yeah, feeling like a failure, like, am I good enough to be doing this? But I think the experience over the years and maturing makes you realise, you can. Not everything's going to be easy.
And that brings back the thick skin, isn't it?
Yeah,
it brings the thick skin. As you gain experience, you learn not to take things so personally. Now you learn to kind of go, okay, that was tough. Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah.
Going to your situation with your client, I've had something similar where it was when COVID hit, and a similar but reverse situation. He wanted to come out of his investments just after COVID, as the market was falling. Right. He didn't need to, for obviously we'd done great financial planning. There was no need. He had cash in the bank. Yeah. But he was just getting twitchy. And I kept saying, don't come out of the portfolio. It will recover. You don't need to, and so on. And eventually he decided to go against my advice and came out, I think, on the 23rd of March, which I believe was the last day. And he came out. And then obviously the market started going up, and we would have periodic conversations where I said, you can go back in at any time, but I can't advise you when to go back in because I can't time the market, which is what I was explaining before. Eventually he did go back in, and he said to me, well, you probably want to say, I told you so. And I was like, well, I'd never say that to you because it could have gone the other way,
You don't know.
But, generally speaking, just listen to your financial planner because they're thinking about you. But I remember at the time, the feeling of I just didn't articulate well enough the reasons why he should stay in the market.
Yes.
But obviously I couldn't have done any more, just like you couldn't have done any more with your lady the other way around.
No, that's it. There is only so much you can do at the end of the day. But it's quite a hard thing to swallow, I think, to actually sit there and genuinely believe that.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I remember losing a client. I was starting. I think I was quite early in my financial coaching career. And I was sensing something was not quite right. And I was trying to help her. But I think she kept saying, it works for me. She kept saying, it works for me. But she was hiding everything from her husband. The money she was putting away in savings and investments and pensions, not running anything by him. And she kept saying, it works for me. And I walked away, and I was trying to convince her that transparency is a good thing, which is, but at the right time.
Yeah.
When things would have been good, and I felt like, my part of me, I wanted her to be safe and put all of it on the table and collaborate and find a way to work together, because she was saying it works for me on one hand, and on the other one she felt terrible about him not knowing and her not knowing what he was up to. It was just not healthy. But to your point, I felt like maybe I haven't articulated it properly. And she went offline. She came through an employer, so she changed coaches, thankfully, so hopefully she found a better discussion partner. But I felt like I have utterly failed her, because at that point, I was trying so hard to help her by doing things that she wasn't ready for, with all the good intent in the world, but she was absolutely not ready for. And I was thinking, what if I asked her to get to the point of why she's doing what she's doing, and spend more time in the why area to help her unpack her thinking more, rather than just being on that, maybe you can try this, maybe you can try that, just to suggest ways. Now I know better, but going back, what a learning. She still pops up in my mind when I try too hard. I kind of remember that case, and I pull back. It's like, no, this is not the right time. You can see it because you've seen it many times before, but they need to see it first for them to move in a direction that suits them. It's not for my benefit, it's for their benefit.
I with myself, I'd say, I don't think I've had many failures. I've had challenges, I would say. But I'd say one thing I kind of kick myself for ever occurring was that I had an internal breach in the company I was working for, unintentionally, of course. And it had to be like an investigation, and in the end I just got a slap on the wrist. But it was such a scary moment, and I didn't realise I'd done such a thing, and I was young when it happened, and it's that anxiety you get from it. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen now? This, that, and the other. But I learned from it. I've never done it again, and I never will, hopefully. But that was tough. That was, I'm kind of regretting that it ever happened. But there we go. We live and learn, don't we? We truly live and learn from it all.
Yeah, got to move on, haven't you?
And we're all here today, successful
We
financial
are.
planners,
Yeah.
financial coaches.
Yeah.
So just goes to show.
It makes me smile, because one day I was driving. I was driving my son. Well, that was the intention of driving my son to school. And then I quickly realized that, because I had a presentation later in the day and I was going to come to London, I was driving straight to the train station with my kid. And obviously I was so much in my head, I did not see that. So I was driving family, and then he speaks. And then I had that realization, oh my goodness, I turn to left instead of to the right. And then obviously I had a bit of a go at him. Why don't you say so? He said, Mom, I didn't really no, because I obviously try to trust you. You're driving this car. So we ended up being in traffic, and I was like, having a moment. And after everything, I said, Alexander, you really must, when you see something is not right, just tell me. Don't be afraid to tell me it is not right. And then the next morning I was driving. He said, Mom, are you sure we're still driving to the school? And I had a moment when I almost took it personally. Like, no, of course, we are going still to the school. Thank you for the reminder. And I was thinking, all these failures that we have, sometimes they're like the comma in the sentence, because we get to be on this autopilot all the time, that sometimes we miss the turns. Sometimes we just miss, taking the steps to the outcome, because we're so focused on it's like a second nature, right? So sometimes these moments are the trigger when you kind of forced to kind of pause and kind of review where you are. And maybe test your ability to, am I good enough? Am I able to navigate these challenges, but in the most constructive way possible? Obviously, it doesn't feel great, because I did feel like a failure. I was thinking, oh my goodness, I would have driven my kid to the train station, taken him with me to London without knowing. What sort of mom am I?
I'm sure you'd have had a great day.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like me. On a Saturday, I have to take my daughter to a drama class, but it's right by my gym, and I've got to remember to take her first before I go to my gym. And the amount of times I've nearly taken her to a spin class is unbelievable. Where she's the same now. She's only 5. It's like, Mummy, don't forget I'm here. Yes, bless her. Yeah. Well, lots of good content covered there, I think. So thank you very much for joining us today. If you'd like to know when our next episode is on, please do follow us, or the Personal Finance Society, on LinkedIn and YouTube. And by all means, give us all a follow on LinkedIn as well.